Ohio, a land rich with history, with cornfields and blue-collar workers. In the heart of north-central Ohio is a small town, a town full of people with heart, with faith, and with love for a college that sits on a little 135-acre plot of land. Throughout the years, Ashland University has survived the hardships and financial difficulties, and when the country was in distress, Ashland University has stood tall. But as times change and people change, the one thing that remains the same is athletics. Beginning in 1920, the people, the teams, and the stories of Ashland athletics was born.
There was a crisis. There was, in early college football, there were people being killed.
A lot of injuries. Teddy Roosevelt called a meeting of the college presidents in Washington, D.C.
So he invited some of the great coaches to the White House to try and get a summit, because there were places that were talking about banning football and banning sports. And it was the summit at the White House that became the outgrowth of what became the NCAA.
Dr. Jacobs obviously felt if we're going to get control of this, we've got to get it under our control and under our wing. We have to have it under control of coaches and athletic directors who will do the scheduling and oversee the program. That was a period of growth at that time.
One of the pillars of Ashland was always health. They talked about how this was a healthy community and those kind of places. So it was a natural outgrowth, I think, to make that fit into the idea of competition. And other schools around Ohio has a rich tradition. You think about development of the professional football starting in Ohio and those kind of things, and where it later became the Hall of Fame. I think it was a natural gravitation to say, okay, let's have collegiate teams.
Ashland, as any college, had nicknames. They began as the Brethren, they began as the Purple. The nicknames are given to them by sports writers, newspaper sports writers. So somewhere along the line, we became the Titans. In the early 1930s, got together and put together a contest for, we need a new name for our athletic teams. This is the time of the Depression. Roosevelt puts together, among other plans, the National Recovery Administration, which is going to help boost the economy. And they came up with an identifier for the organization. It attracted the attention of the students. The students then had a competition, they took a vote, and we became the Ashland Eagles.
We had no track when Gildads came to Ashland. His father was a Brethren minister. USC, Nebraska, Texas, all wanted him to go to their school, but he was going to go to a Brethren school, even though we had no program or no coach. He was the national champion in cross country and in the mile, the collegiate champion. Then in 1943, he was awarded the Sullivan Award, which was emblematic of the Amateur Athlete of the Year. Had the world record for the mile, which at that time was 4:07, far and above the best athlete we've ever had.
In 1948, Dr. Glenn L. Clayton, a 37-year-old history professor, became the new president of Ashland College.
What I'm saying is, in all those first 4 years, we had one crisis right after another.
Founders Hall burned down. That was a terrible time.
In the middle of the night, where we were awakened, I was awakened. I think by that time, my dad had already gone.
Miss Clayton and I were visiting with friends in Mansfield. Well, we immediately left and started up Route 42 toward Ashland.
But my mother, calls over to the living room window, my older brother and I, next oldest brother, and you could see the flames shooting up from Founders Hall. And it was quite a sight to see.
Pretty soon I could begin to see the glare in the sky, and I knew it was more than just a little departmental fire. And when we arrived here at about midnight, the whole roof was on fire and the whole thing was going.
My parents actually lived catty-corner across the street from Founders Hall, and at that time my mom was pregnant with me. So there I was, present at the fire, but not really present.
When he did get home, I believe I remember him saying he caught a typewriter that somebody tossed to him out of one of the windows that they could still get to before they had to leave the building.
It was very traumatic. Most people thought that would be the end of the college.
The early 1950s brought many hardships on the college. But in this decade, athletics started to make a difference at Ashland College. The place it all started, a small football field off of King Road.
We ran into all kinds of problems. We had, first of all, a very serious financial problem.
But he walked into Ashland College and there wasn't a lot of hope there. Where Clark and Kilhefner are now, that was the stands for the football field. It was Redwood Stadium. Kilhefner was the home side and Clark was the visitor side. It was kind of sunken down low as it is now.
You were right down on the people, and it had a tree that grew up on the 50-yard line, a big tree that shaded you in the fall when the sun was shining.
The one side where Clark Hall is, that was always mud. And there would be straw placed in there, then they would paint lines right over the straw. It was a very small college atmosphere, very rudimentary in its approach.
That first game we played against College of Worcester, they got off their bus, got straight across the line, walked up and down the field throwing rocks off the field.
And the old gym set up a little bit higher on the field or above the field. And that's where the locker rooms were. The grayness and the dankness and the dirt, the musty smells and dripping water. It was not a very nice facility, but for the times, it wasn't that bad.
Ashland was not a place where athletes or coaches wanted to go. The biggest transition took place in that era from about 1955-56, where Ashland athletics really grew for a lot of reasons there.
When Dr. Clayton assumed the presidency in 1948, that was probably the beginning of it, because then in 1954 he was able to hire Bob Bronson, who definitely improved the football program immediately. His first season was undefeated with the Hungry Hounds.
Yeah, my dad probably loved, I would say maybe family first, but maybe it was his dogs. And he loved to hunt. Dad had a way of nicknaming and a way of connecting that way, so he decided that they were the Hungry Hounds, and I can't tell you how he came upon that and how he hit that. But then the team adopted that, and when they would tackle an opponent and get them on the ground, they would growl in their face. And back in the early 50s, there were no face guards. Then it was a single bar. And even at one point, the growling was so well known that before the game started, the referees came into the Ashland College locker room and said, "We want you to know if there's any growling, we're going to penalize you. It'll be a personal misconduct foul, and it's going to be 15 yards." So that was, the word was out that was intimidation. It was really, we would call it intimidation now. That was the Hungry Hounds.
And that kind of convinced the student population and the community and the athletes themselves that Ashland wanted to compete. We wanted to win.
I think as far as his commitment to Ashland and its athletic program, he wanted to make sure that things were done up to the best that they could possibly be done.
It was a summer commencement. I went to it, and the speaker was Bob Bronson. The first time I ever had any real contact with him or heard him speak or anything like that. And one of the things he spoke about was the Ashland difference, our educational philosophy, a little different than most schools. There was a great emphasis on the individual, and I just felt that was a place where the college just didn't accept you as a student and then leave you to your own devices, that they maybe cared about how you did.
And about as early as I can remember, my dad began taking me to Ashland College games. I think the first ones I remember was when I was about age 6, going to Redwood Stadium and watching Coach Martinelli, which happened to be his first year, begin to coach the Eagles teams. I grew up then on the 48-yard line of the football games with reserved seats right in front of Dr. and Mrs. Clayton.
The school, very early on, in the early 50s, began to become more interested in athletics. I suppose I had something to do with that. But so did George Donges, and so did Bob Bronson when he came, and so has Fred Martinelli.
Bob Stokes came along in 1958. That was the first time we had separate coaches for football, men's basketball, and baseball. That was sort of opened the modern era. And Stokes was able to do the same thing that Bob Bronson did in football. We had a team in 1961-62 that went to the national tournament, NAIA.
With Larry Auger and Ritz Houghton Johnson, I watched all those games from the balcony. It was, and that put Ashland College on the map.
He was the first real successful basketball coach in the early 60s, late 50s, and he kind of started the tradition of our basketball program and got it off the ground. After him, obviously, was Bill Musselman, who took the program to a different level and had great success.
Bill Musselman was a basketball coach, but he definitely was also a showman and a promoter of the program.
Man, that was so exciting to come to a packed gym and see the ball handling routines that they did in their pregame warm-up.
They would play Sweet Georgia Brown, and it was a whole show. And it was a whole evening of glitz. There were even examples of students that stayed for the pregame and then left.
We had 5 full pages in Sports Illustrated just on our men's basketball team. 5 full pages.
The sports information director at the time, Chuck Mistovich, probably had a very easy job because it wasn't hard to promote our basketball team at that time. Our men's basketball team got more attention than any other athletic program on campus.
We really started to, for lack of a better term, roll in athletics when we got all those great coaches and they attracted, great coaches attract great people.
There are 3 undefeated teams, three teams that have gone undefeated from beginning to end. The 54 team, the 67 team, the 1972 team. Now the 1972 was the most highly rated team we've had in our history.
You saw the growth, and that was significant in what we were doing and working towards.
The first step towards success in the early years was acquiring the right coaches necessary to be successful. In order for the coaches to attract the right athletes, they needed the right facilities. On the other side of King Road is where construction began.
Then you have the baby boom start right after that, and you realize that those kids born in 1946 became 18 in 1964, and they caused much of the social change of the 60s.
Glenn Clayton was unbelievably the architects of our athletic program.
During the 29 years that Dr. Clayton continued as president of the college, 31 new buildings were added to the campus complex. Student enrollment grew to nearly 5,000. Is it any wonder that many people refer to Ashland as the college that Clayton built?
When we built the Physical Education Center, we built the Physical Education Center from bonded indebtedness that was tied in with Clark and Kilhefner Hall. But when you take a look at the broad aspect of it, it was an unbelievable facility.
Once we got the new gym built up in 1967 and we started to win and play some nationally acclaimed teams, That gym back then held almost 3,000 people, and there were times we filled it up.
Sarver Field, we built a track which we later hosted we've hosted two national track meets, 1969 and 1971. Also, when we were building the Physical Education Center, we built a Conard Fieldhouse, and that was sort of an afterthought that we built for $20,000. Every Friday night we had track meets, home track meets in the winter, just like we'd have a home basketball game. There'd be a lot of people that would attend. So those were at that time the facilities that really gave us a shot in the arm.
In those early years, men's athletics was the main focus. But in the 1960s, even before Title IX was born, women at Ashland College were making a difference and an impact for girls in sports.
We did have what I would call extramural competitions. And so I can remember playing basketball against Oberlin or Worcester.
We'd get our contract and it was for teaching. We would get a full load of 12 hours to teach, so we were really hired for teachers. If we wanted to coach, we could coach. If we didn't want to coach, we didn't have to. That was not part of our salary or part of our contract. So it was our desire to do that. And if we wanted to, that was fine. And we did. We wanted to.
All of us, women that coached, traveled, took our teams to all the different places. We used our own money, our own vehicles, we just did that. That was what we did.
The men were all involved and organized, and they belonged to a conference, and they were out recruiting, and we didn't have scholarships. So we just took whoever came on campus and they became our teams. We'd hold a tryout, and those that tried out and made it, that's who we had.
They had intramurals allowed, but very little was done with intramural money. He began to hire women, Fred Martinelli did, because he had a vision too, not as strong as all of ours probably. And then Carol Mertler came from Muskingum College, and it was her idea to use the intramural money to develop beyond the extramural program.
It was from this standard that I developed convictions early on that all human beings should have equal opportunities for the good things of life, the things that life has to offer. Since all wish for themselves the good things of life, sport is one of those good things in life that ought not be denied another on any basis of discrimination.
My motivation was to do something to open the doors to girls, women, towards scholarships in college and universities for sporting ability.
Title IX brought tens of thousands of young women into the collegiate environment because, there was a time when there were gold medalists in certain like swimming and some sports who couldn't get college scholarships because there were not athletic opportunities for them. 1972 with Title IX, that opened up a huge avenue for the opportunity for young women. Leaders in business, industry, and so forth came out of that movement. Many of them got to go to college because of the opportunity of sports scholarships.
In the era that I played in, women's athletics, it was right at the beginning of Title IX.
We did fight for Title IX, and Title IX helped a lot because Title IX then opened the opportunity.
And it probably wasn't until 78, almost 80, 1980, that the government came out with what they meant by equal opportunities. Because everybody was wondering, do they have to have equal numbers participating? Do they have to have equal number of sports? Do they have to have equal salaries? Everybody was wondering, what did Title IX mean?
Dr. Carol Mertler and Dr. Ruth Jones, they both together just really were at the cutting edge, I think, in that time and wanting to promote women's athletics.
A lot of respect for the program here and what those pioneers, the Ella Shannons and the Carol Mertlers were doing to promote women's sports at Ashland University. And then I played against Darla Pleiss. So I mean, you know, an All-American and well-deserved All-American, didn't matter what level, but a heck of an athlete. And so it was a lot of respect for what Ashland brought.
Ashland really was a leader. There was no getting around it. During the 70s, 80s, 90s, and the advancement of women's athletics.
I think we worked hard at it. I think we had a lot of kids from the East that were good athletes. They had a big physical education program, which lended itself to having good sport teams. So yes, I do think we were way ahead.
It was, you know, it was like at the beginning of women's athletics again, you know, in terms of the boom of the explosion of women's sports. And so we were excited, you know, just a thrill to be able to have these experiences, to travel places.
All the things that you put into it, the travel and the expenses and the idea you had that girls and women really wanted, the girls that wanted opportunities were given opportunities. So those were highlights for me, you know, like, hey, we did do something right.
There's a constant need for attention to it. I think when it came into law in 1972, that some tremendous things came from it, and women's athletics was one of those things that benefited greatly from it, and probably because it had the biggest gap in inequality with our male counterparts. The best part is it's evolved more from being a law to being do this because it's the right thing to do, not because it's a law. Because male or female deserve the opportunities to participate and then the support to be successful.
We were all under the AIAW, which was
Association for Intercollegiate Athletics for Women. And that was the organization that would be comparable to the NCAA in regards that they made up rules for competition and they ran championships.
1976, the very first qualifying women's college basketball championship.
And so 16 teams from around the country came here, and it was a huge thing, a huge event. You know, the gym was packed with people from all over.
That was quite an event.
It was the pinnacle, you know, of what happened here during those times. It was, you know, it was a real privilege for Ashland to be able to host it.
During the 1970s, with the inclusion of women's sports and recent success of the Musselman and Martinelli years, athletics as a whole reached a pinnacle for that era. The rejoicing of those times was short-lived due to the impact the 70s had on all colleges and universities, which in turn affected athletics.
During the 60s, one of the ways that people could avoid the draft was to go to college.
President Nixon went to a voluntary draft. And so by the time I got to college in '73, it was voluntary draft. We experienced a tremendous decrease in enrollment. And what goes along with that was a tremendous financial challenge because we're tuition driven and we probably always will be.
Our enrollment dropped from about 2,500 down to under 1,000. Down to under 1,000. We dropped sports.
I would say 1973 until maybe 1984. It's a long period of time. 85 were the worst financial times in the history of the school.
And we balanced the budget in the last 2 years. When I left here, I felt it was under control, but there were some problems. Perhaps as a new man coming in, I don't know what it was, but for a year and a half, it was pretty chaotic after that.
Dr. Clayton retired from the presidency in June 1977.
He really supported all athletics.
That man had an impact here that perpetuates. And if you were around him, you were a better person. You spoke better, you acted better, you thought better. and he had that impact on this entire campus. This university would be a far different place if he hadn't been here for all those years.
Joe Schultz becomes president in 1979.
He was instrumental in giving us hope. He was a guy that was an incurable optimist and had a lot of enthusiasm at a time when things were at their lowest.
The other thing that Joe got involved with was expanding the off-campus sites.
At a time when there was tens of thousands of Ashland College alumni, to change the name of the school to Ashland University. On May 1st, 1989, we officially did that. He took a lot of heat for that, but he did it, and then what happened? Everybody else followed us. He should get a lot of credit for, if not saving the institution, certainly digging it out of a very deep hole.
So Joe and the athletic director, which would have been Fred Martinelli, football coach at the time, determined that to raise visibility, the best thing to do would be to go Division II.
Division II was only in existence a couple of years before that, and not many schools were Division II. In the 1980s, nobody knew what Division II was. Part of the problem was Division II itself didn't know who they were. There had only been 3 schools in Division II in Ohio. They were Central State and Wright State and Ashland.
Division I, Division 1A. Division II, all of those can give scholarships. Division III can't give scholarships, so it's kind of tough to get quality athletes, if you will.
Secondly, because Ashland had gotten very good in small college sports, and most of the schools that were in the Division III realm did not want to play Ashland. So Ashland said, we've got to find a place where we can play. We've got to find a place where we can market ourselves. And I believe that Joe Schultz made that decision as president, along with Fred Martinelli as athletic director. And it was a very smart move and very appropriate for Ashland to do at that time.
During that time, Ashland athletics were built up and found success in many ways. Once the monumental move to Division II took place in 1979, athletics turned the page into a new era. Before the success of that era could be reached, one particular athletic program had a major crisis on its hands.
And I remember we hired Keith Dambrot, and Keith Dambrot had been brought in here as a young, ambitious coach. And so he came here in '91 and brought in a number of young athletes with him. To my observation, the athletes were being brought in primarily as athletes. I know that there were some who were failing many classes and not achieving academic success.
There's been a lot of controversy surrounding the Ashland University Eagle basketball program this season. Surprisingly, the Eagle Cagers still continue to shine, especially when they play in a certain building on King Road. That building, Charles Cates Gymnasium. The Eagles try to make it 41 in a row at home as they gear up for their 3rd straight NCAA tournament berth. Eagle basketball action coming up next, right here on TV2 Sports.
I was working at IUP at that time back in Indiana, Pennsylvania, and Ashland was winning like crazy. And one of the assistant athletic directors I was working with had worked here as a track coach and as an assistant football coach. And I said, man, Ashland is really winning. And he goes, I'll tell you what, he said, they better win it all this year because he said the NCAA's coming.
There were problems. There were discipline problems. There were problems outside of campus. And to the best of my understanding, it was a team that though they were athletically magnificent, and most of us loved the style of ball that the Dambrot teams played.
They won a lot of games, got up to #1 in the country, and you can't argue with his record.
But at what cost? And I believe that much of it was done at the cost of the integrity of the program. The program declined quite rapidly as a result of Coach Dambrot's leaving.
For the coaches that came in the aftermath of that, it was hard. The recruiting was hard to build the confidence back up. It's taken 3 or 4 coaches to get through that and build that sense of trust with our fans, with our alumni, and actually the high school coaches in the state. In those early years, it was hard. It just didn't get turned around in a year or two. You're talking 5, 6, 7 years.
In today's world of Ashland athletics, success is witnessed every day. But the vision for success was first born in the 1990s with the athletic directors.
Bill Widener was here 3 years, I think, but he had a background at Ohio State, SMU, some places like that. He started that, made some hires that were very, very good during that time. Really started to change the culture. Bill Goldring came in here as the athletic director, was here 16 years, continued that, made some great hires. But between those two guys, they hired a John Shalley in baseball, Sheila Goulis in softball, Lee Owens in football. So there's just 3 examples. Judd Logan in track and field. So that starts that. Bill did a lot too to upgrade facilities, upgrade programming, so we'd have more support, better coaches, more staffs with more full-time people. So that way student athletes are taken care of better.
With Bill Goldring as our athletic director, his vision was he wanted success and to provide opportunities for success across the board.
And to do that, not just with 1 or 2 sports, but to do that across the board. And so Bill wanted to see success in every sport.
When I first came here, there was just that feeling of 2 or 3 sports, that's good enough. We changed that, and then once a couple started, everybody else in the department said, I don't want to be left behind, I want to win like they are.
You know, there's a level of expectation based upon the success of all the athletic programs, an expectation to keep up with all the other teams here. There's just such a great athletic tradition here.
Bill had an idea of how to achieve success. And part of that was to drive success on the conference and national level, to put Ashland on the map.
Once you win on the national level like that, that helps get the word out. It makes recruiting a little easier. People associate winning with Ashland, or they know about Ashland.
I think the belief really changed, the culture changed. And it's hard to change a culture, it really is. But it changed, I think, with people who came in here and said, okay, we're going to raise the bar. We're going to find a way to do things. We're going to use what Ashland's always said, that accent on the individual, and we're going to coach them as hard as we can. But we're going to get good individuals in here, and we're going to coach them as hard as we can, and we're going to get better. Bill was a big believer in that we are good enough to go out there and play against anybody. That's the one thing I think he really brought.
Over a 16-year period, Bill was one of the most, if not the most successful Division II athletic director in the nation, taking Ashland from a regionally successful athletic program to a nationally successful program.
It was one of those pivotal points in establishing the women's basketball program here, overall women's program, that needed to take place. And I really had a kind of one of those aha moments about core values and about vision for a program, and being able to not only articulate that, but to make sure that the things that I did fell in line with what those core values were. So my recruiting, my hiring, all that needed to mesh together with what we stood for. None of that would have worked unless I had the support of Bill Goldring, my athletic director. And that was the beautiful piece. He and I sat down after the season, and I'll never forget, he looked at me and he said, what are we going to do to turn this ship around? What are we going to do to right the path and get this back on track?
The vision has been the same. We've wanted people who have an Ohio history. We've wanted people who had a high view of academics. We wanted people who had personal integrity, people who had a love for Division II, and also, maybe most of all, were a good fit to Ashland University, understood what Ashland wanted to be all about. And lo and behold, many of us began to realize this was what we needed, that Al King was the perfect successor to Bill Goldring. He had seen where it had come from. He had worked closely with Bill, but Al also had an eye on details. And what Al did was develop the internal structure around himself particularly, a structure that has given support to all of our coaches to build the program in the areas that it needed.
Over the years, Ashland has bred hundreds of All-Americans and individual athletes who have raised a national championship trophy, but those athletes had never won a team national championship. 93 years after the birth of Ashland Athletics, the wait was over.
Ashland women's basketball team.
In 2013, I was in San Antonio. I had been down there the year before when we lost the national championship in overtime.
That we had fallen short the year before in overtime in a hard-fought battle. We're able to focus and come back and stay on task with the unfinished business that we had, and to be able to bring Ashland University its first national championship.
After going back the second time, we were on a business trip. You know, the first time around it was more like, wow, what an experience. There are all of these different things that we can do. They took us on a riverboat tour, all of these things. And the second year, we were all like, we don't even care about the riverboat tour. We are here to win a national championship. And I think that mindset shift definitely helped us stay focused and really locked in the whole time. Our goal was to come home with a national championship, and I'm thankful we were able to.
There's never been a moment like that to see an Eagle team win a national championship, a team championship. I know that we had won many individual championships in track and field, in wrestling, in swimming, but there was something special and new to see a team sport win a national championship.
Everything that we had done all those years, all women that really believed strong to get from AIW to NCAA and to finances and to support. I felt like, okay, all those things we did, it was worth it.
But certainly it was also wonderful to celebrate the second national championship a few years later with Robin Freilich and her team.
Throughout the 100 years of Ashland athletics, there have been a number of reasons as to why the athletic program has become so successful. But first, you have to understand that it wasn't always that way. There have been hardships, times of trouble, and great distraught. But the people in the community of Ashland have always been there to carry each other through those difficult times. After the people who have played those games, wrestled through matches, swam those meets, and dominated those tournaments, you will find two outlying reasons that can be credited to the success of Ashland University athletics: the culture and the coaches.
We've had exceptional athletes in every sport, and that's really, really special. It's not just one program that is successful. Our entire athletic department has had All-Americans, national champions in every single category.
Don't overlook the athletes, because you can talk about all the coaching you have and everything like that. You still need student athletes who can play. So you have a Billy Cundiff in football, Sean Robbins in track and field, Jamie Minnick McDaniel in swimming. Those are players and student athletes that could compete on a national level. Adam Shaheen now in football. Those players came here and had belief in our system, and once they started coming, more student athletes who were at a higher level came.
In my personal opinion, the best player to have ever played here was a guy who in Ashland college history is a little bit obscure, but it was a guy who actually was my age, from Dayton Dunbar, who played here at Ashland from 71 and I think through 74, but a guy by the name of Billy Higgins was an unbelievable 6'2", 6'3" guard. He went on and played in the old ABA for the Virginia Squires. Higgins was an unbelievable player. Now there have been many, many good ones, including LeBron Gladden, who in the 1980s established the point scoring record here at the university, who was a tremendous player.
The GLIAC is the best conference in the country. There's no school in the GLIAC that has a college football Hall of Fame player. Now there are several coaches, but no players. Bill is the first one. Bill played from 1990 to 94. Bill had 368 tackles. Now, if you count the sacks, 71 sacks as a part of that, that's a stat that's way out of sight. Had great strength, agility. The guys on the sidelines used to look at him. Because he was just all over the field, and the defenses, the opponents had to try to run away from him.
Jamie Minnick McDaniel in swimming. She was a native of Ashland, went to the Division I level, and actually was an All-American at Division I at Tennessee. So that tells you how good she was in swimming. But she came back to Ashland for the last 2 years, and we knew when we got her, there's some things that she could do that nobody else could do. And Jamie was tall and lean, and when she would go up on the blocks to swim, she'd whistle. And you'd see the kids around her say, wow, what about this? This is really big. She'd wear the goggles. There's kids that say, I don't want to swim against her. There's other kids that even on the relay said to me, I'm scared to mess up because I'm on the same relay with Jamie. But she was so good, and in those years, we had a couple years where we hosted swimming and diving nationals over in Canton, which was really neat, so our fans could come to that. And I'll always remember this, the year that she won, it set national records in the 50 and the 100 freestyle. She's going through, and I can't remember which one it was, it might have been the 100, but she made the turn to come back for the last lap coming back, and the guy who's doing the PA had done swimming PA for a long time, and he kept saying about, she's ahead of record pace. Say for a while, she's on pace, and she's ahead of the NCAA record pace. And when she made the turn coming back, I can always remember him saying, okay, bring her home for a national championship and for a record. And it was unreal to see that and see people stand. This is swimming, okay? People talk about football and basketball all the time, but this was swimming, and it was just such a neat thing to see. She held that record for more than 10 years. But to see that excitement, the president, the university came over and watched that. Parents, people just said, wow, that's how good Ashland is now. They can host this event, and you have somebody who can win a national championship and be a national title contender. And we're in the top 10 in the country as a team.
One young woman in particular, Julie Woodman, she graduated with me. She was a senior swimmer. She was like a 4-time All-American, and I'm pretty sure she won a national championship.
But I went out there particularly to watch Miles run the 400-meter GLIAC championship race. I wasn't disappointed. I'm sitting there on the last curve, and here comes Miles around the track. And he's got a 2-second lead on the next second place person. I'm sitting there with Coach Martinelli, who had been at Ashland for years and years, and we watch Miles run, and we watch him finish that race, and we watch him complete the 400 meters in 45.5, more than 2 seconds ahead of the second place runner in the GLIAC. And I think both of our jaws dropped. We turned to each other in awe. I was awed by it, I was shocked by it, but most of all, I was just really, really impressed. And I thought, I've never seen anything like this. I've never seen a world-class runner run like that live and in person, and to think it was happening here at Ashland University.
We've had so many exceptional athletes in every single sport. That's really cool. That's an athletic department that I want to be a part of, because it's not just one sport, it's everyone so invested.
When you look at what makes athletic programs successful, and it does go back to the people, it goes back to tradition.
Ashland has a tradition of excellence. We pursued excellence when we didn't have anything, but we pursued it.
What the strong points of Ashland College were, and to me they seem to add up to a relatively small but very friendly campus, a place where most people knew everybody else, and where professors would go out of their way to help a student, and if necessary, stay right with him. And to me, this was very important.
In any given class, you know that you have half a dozen athletes because there are so many students on this campus, but there are so many different kinds of it. And the fact is they blend in, until you find out, you don't see the 6'8", athlete who weighs 300 pounds, but you see the lacrosse player and the swimmer and the tennis player. And the fact of the matter is that these students blend in. They're like everyone else.
We have been very intentional in the last 20 years of hiring coaches who understand the importance of academics. They serve greatly in the capacity of supporting the academic mission of the university.
Accent on the individual has to be something we live.
I think what our coaches have really done a nice job of is identifying what kind of student athlete can succeed here.
We want to find guys that have a future, that want a future. and academically they have to be driven.
It is a special type of student athlete who needs to be willing to come here, to be willing to put in the amount of work that's expected, to be able to perform well in the classroom, to be able to serve in the community. All of those different things that Ashland has expectations for. We want to have champions on the court, but it's champions in every avenue of their life, and I think that's what set Ashland apart.
I am most grateful, I would say first and foremost, for what Ashland University stands for, and for the core values of faith and of belief in people, and putting a high price tag on that relationship piece, and providing an environment where I could actually help my young ladies grow in all areas of their life.
And that's what people outside say to me. They say, you've done a very good job of building your culture. You know what the expectations are, your kids know what they are, the coaches and staff know what it is. So I guess it's that expectation. But everybody can say that. You've got to try to raise that bar and do it. And we've been able to do it, not only do it, but keep it going.
I think the biggest compliment I ever got really was from fans that said, you know, when we watch your team play, we'd be proud to have any one of those young ladies be our daughter.
Ashland University and Ashland, the city of Ashland, like they go hand in hand, and I think that's also part of what makes it so special, is that we have a true community and people want to be a part of that.
I think it's just different. There's a tighter knit, more intimate relationship with people on this campus than there is anywhere else. You see people in grocery stores, you know what I mean? It's like something that you'd see in a Hallmark show, you know? So it's neat to be around people that are authentic. And I think that's something that Ashland has more than anywhere else.
There's a lot of people across campus that are supportive, and then also the alumni that are out there, and then those that fill the seats, that love their sports and love what they see portrayed for us on the court.
I say it before every home game in my head, just I can't imagine a person who wouldn't want to play at this university and play in front of the crowd and the support that we have.
I've been in some other athletic departments that are really, really good, but this is elite here, and that's something that I think you can see at Ashland just from walking around here. It's just people want to be a part of this.
How do we get from mediocre to really good? I think we hired great coaches, and we continue to hire great coaches.
That was, I think, maybe his major contribution to Ashland Athletics was Fred Martinelli.
Fred was good at hiring good people, and we continued with that. Ella and I continued with that.
I think that our athletic directors have done a really good job of hiring exceptional coaches.
And then when you look at the longevity of some of the coaches that are here and you know, and had opportunities to go other places perhaps, but those people having bought into what Ashland stands for.
I mean, there's been some stable coaches. You know, you look at different programs here, and you look at the stability with the coaching staffs and the success of those coaching staffs. There's not many Division I programs that have the coaching staffs that there's very few that have the level of coaching staff that we have here.
Look at our coaching staffs. These people are nationally known at Ashland, Ohio.
I think the success of the hires over the last 20-some years has been the working relationship and the vision that Bill Goldring and Al King have had for the institution.
Coaching opportunities don't open up all the time. And especially at Ashland, the best coaches, like, they're here for a while. I mean, look at Jug Logan, John Shalley, Sheila Goulas was here, Sue Ramsey, 20 plus years.
This group we have in here today reminds me of the group we brought in the 1960s. Tremendous coaches that started here, in many cases went on to national prominence at larger universities, and were people of integrity, worked hard, were committed, were loyal, and had great success at this level.
Looking back, we've had 3 football coaches in a 60-year period. That says something.
Football has been stable, tradition.
Dr. Fred Martinelli, who was here for 40 years, 35 as a Hall of Fame football coach.
Coach Owens, 15 years, 5 of the years we've had NCAA playoff attempts.
Track and field with Judd, and just what they've accomplished. Well, he's been here a long time, and he's a great coach, maybe the best coach that we've ever had here.
We have national championships in track. Very recently, we have a great track program here.
Both in the indoor and outdoor, 2 national championships. And knowing how many times he was so close to it goes back to because he's one of those many coaches here that does it the right way.
In baseball, Coach Donges was able to put together some great teams in the 50s, Lou Markle in the 1970s, and of course John Shalley has enabled us to go to NCAA postseason play 16 of the last 22 years.
Baseball with John Shalley is just, you go down the list and it's just, there's tremendous coaches.
We've just been the dominant team in Division II baseball in Ohio. There's no question about it. In basketball, after Stokes got the ball rolling, Bill Musselman came in and we rose to national prominence there. With Coach Ellenwood, we've been to the NCAA postseason twice now.
With women's basketball with Sue. And I think you have to look at the stability that has been created with great coaches, and you end up having a lot of success as a result.
And then I think our coaching staffs across the board have done a great job of getting the Ashland fit.
To be a great coach here, you have to bring in the right student athlete, the right assistant coaches. You have to know how to work with other people on campus, and that's something that I think we have here better than anywhere else.
People of integrity that work hard, that are loyal, that are committed to the mission of the school, that are committed to the individual student athletes.
And I think that's why we've been able to be so successful, is because 1, we've got great coaches, and 2, they go and get the Ashland fit kids that we need.
So it'll always be, in my opinion, attracting and retaining great coaches, and then they'll attract the great students, athletes, and then you're going to have great programs. We've been able to do that. It's not easily done. I think Ashland is atypical on that for a small college in the Midwest to be able to attract the kind of national figures. Fred Martinelli, John Shalley, these are nationally known people. Judd Logan, Sue Ramsey, you can go on and on. Robin Freilich, Bowling Green, Joe Godfrey was at Southern Indiana. I'm throwing names out. Bill Musselman. These are nationally known figures that coached here, that had impact here. That's how you do it. And from my perspective, and the guy we have now, Lee Owens, the coaching staff we have across the board, I didn't mention a lot of them, John Ellen, there's so many good ones. This is one of the greatest coaching staffs, maybe in the country, small college. And we had that in the 60s and much of the 70s. That's how you do it. We must be pretty good. We must be a pretty good place to live and learn, because these kids will come in and they're able to have that total experience beyond athletics. But athletics, we need to apologize for athletics. Many times that's the reason they're coming here. But they sit in those chemistry classes, the business classes, the art classes, and oftentimes they don't total. Their involvement in athletics isn't 4 years, but they become a national alum. And if they have a good experience, if people care, if they were given a good chance, if we were fair to them, they'll be great alumni.